advent of the Food Network some 25 years ago, and the hundreds, maybe thousands, of subsequent food-centric shows, documentaries, and movies, people are now obsessed with food, and through that, obsessed with the people that cook it. We're fascinated by the process, vision, thoughtfulness, and creativity chefs possess to develop extraordinary foods that delight our palates, and we're eager to learn more. And that's why we've asked 3 excellent chefs from our community to share their craft and why they love food and cooking. Hopefully you've all had a chance to enjoy the creations of these talented people, because if you haven't, you're definitely going to want to after today. Can you all please join me in welcoming Andrea Baumgartner of BernBaum's, Patricia Vetter of Prairie St John's, and Travis Rosenbluth of Harvestable. Sorry, Travis.
Good morning, everybody. I have to look at my notes a little bit because I'm usually, I like being in the kitchen. I don't actually like doing things like this, but I see a lot of friendly faces, so I appreciate that. I'll start off with a little bit about what drove me to go to cooking school and become a chef. Part of it was in college I had the opportunity to live in both France and Spain, and I kind of went gaga over eating. I was able to eat like beautiful food and recognize that all of this food, and I'm not talking fancy food, I'm talking beautiful food in very simple places that I found in my Let's Go France book, which were really budget friendly. And I know there's not Let's Go France anymore, so that dates me as well. There's like, Carrie, someone knows about that. It's before Lonely Planet. And so anyhow, I was able to live there, eat there, and really learn a lot about culture, and it was part of what really made me, food is sort of one of the ways in which I love seeing the world. And so when I came back, I did some other things, and at some point went to cooking school in San Francisco and worked on the West Coast for 10 years. Moved here, worked at the Hotel Donaldson, opened the Green Market, and then when I closed the Green Market, thought, oh, I'm leaving food because I'm a little tired of the schedule, and I'm just ready for the next challenge, but then found 3 years later that the next challenge happened to be a very casual lunch counter and bagel shop. Or the challenge after the next challenge, I should say. So, and something about BernBaum's that has brought to me sort of what initially I loved about food. And I don't think it was, some of it is accidental, some of it is partially designed, but some of the things that I think about and that interest me most about cooking right now, well, the one thing is that I've realized that BernBaum's, because of sort of the way we're situated in this very non-commercial space that doesn't really look like a restaurant, and we're serving food right there for you within 3 feet of us, is that we get this interaction with the community, and we get to see people interact from the community in a way that's really inspiring and actually definitely feeds me as a cook. And so it's made me really reflect on what it is to cook in a community and to provide food for people. And what that brings me to as well is that cooking on whatever scale is an act of love. And it's something that it actually, I'm not even looking at my notes and I didn't follow my outline, so I really apologize. And Annie, you were supposed to go like this, but anyhow, it is an act of love, and people come to eat in a public place for many different reasons, but we are privileged to see people come in when they've had a bad day, when they've had bad news, when they've had good news, and we see that they are fed, and we get to be a small part of that. And that is actually what right now drives me as a cook, way more than creating menus, or even though, I get to do that a little bit, and I get to work every day, on my feet 10 hours with a team of people that I really enjoy. That is what drives me. And then my last point is that with the advent of the Food Network and all of these things that have sort of promoted the life and the role of a chef, it's actually not just one person. It's never one person. It's a team of people. And without everyone I work with, nothing would happen. And I feel like I get a lot of the attention, but I shouldn't be getting a lot of the attention. It's really, without everyone else, it wouldn't be what it is. And so I'm very grateful for the people I work with, and I'm very grateful for the people that choose to come and eat with us every day. Thank you.
Good morning, I'm Patty Vetter, and I am the chef at Prairie St John's, and like Andrea, I'm bad at remembering things, so I have notes as well. So since I can remember as a child, I've always enjoyed cooking and enjoyed food in general. My fondest memories were baking cookies with my mom or grandma, and the memories that we made doing that and the conversations that we had along the way. My mom always figured that I would probably do something in the restaurant industry because I was always playing restaurant as a child, and my stuffed animals were really well fed, she says. So we would always go out to eat because I was the only child too, and so I got to experience a lot of really cool types of food, and I was just intrigued by the restaurant industry and chefs in general. So my dad and I would even attend cooking classes from local chefs in the FM area, and it was so cool to see them share their craft and the passion that they had for their craft with others, and they made these simple ingredients into something just extraordinary, which was amazing and so inspiring. And so I decided that I maybe would want to try it out because it looked cool, I guess. And the Food Network was really in at the time. This was the 25 years ago Megan was talking about. And so I got my first job at the Ramada in Fargo as a prep cook. And right away, it wasn't as glamorous as it looks like on TV. It was a very challenging and tough environment. I would be like one of the few women in a male-dominated field, which I think that's changing now. So that's great to see more women in the field. It's really tough and fast-paced, and it's emotionally, mentally, and physically hard on everyone. It's kind of, you're tired when you get home, and there's never a dull moment. And it's kind of a dangerous environment, too, with all the sharp knives and pointy objects. So, but the reason that I love doing what I do, and I've been in this industry now for 16 years, is I can make a delicious meal through hot food and make it meaningful and comforting at the same time. I love the rush and challenges of a busy day and finding order in a chaotic kitchen because it's always something going on. There's something about being able to create a product that not only tastes delicious, but it's meaningful and comforting. And throughout my culinary journey, I decided to move back to the FM area because my family is really important to me and I wanted to be closer to them. And I think it's great since I've moved back to see the FM community embrace food and see them, it's growing, and they're more aware and concerned about where their food comes from, how it's made, how it's prepared, and it's great to see all the people here get excited about food. It's really awesome. And as I got older, I met my husband, Chris, so I was lucky enough to meet him. And I think he thought when we got married, he was getting a personal chef for life. But that was definitely not the case, because the last thing you want to do when you get home is cook a meal, so we eat out quite a bit. More importantly, though, my journey brought me to Prairie St John's because I wanted to find a more sustainable life for my family. I have a 2.5-year-old now, and I needed a more consistent schedule. And so I was lucky to find that, but more importantly, I get to be a part of something way bigger at a hospital. I never thought I would be in hospital food service, but there's so many options in culinary. Prairie's really opened my eyes to things that I wasn't even aware of that people are struggling with. We're a 110-bed psychiatric facility, and we help people with behavioral, mental health, and substance abuse challenges. And there's so many people that are struggling out there. And I think it's great that I get to work with an awesome team of people, and we're almost like a tight-knit family, which is so great. And we make food on a large scale, but we can still put care and comfort into that food for our patients that are away from home, and that's kind of our mission. We do about 600 meals a day for patients and staff. We do outpatient, inpatient, and sometimes cooking on a large scale is a little challenging, but we have like an awesome team of dietitians and our kitchen team that work together to provide healthy meals and educate patients more about food, which I think is so great because then they can go home and transfer that to their living a better lifestyle. But our mission is that by putting care into our cooking, that we can offer care and comfort and familiarity to our patients as they get better. And I think as a chef, it's so awesome that being a chef is about serving our customers and making them happy. And food offers pleasure and nourishment and has the power to bring us together. But it also can be a form of care, which is why I go to work every day. So thanks.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Putin. I wanted to thank everyone for coming out today, and shout out to the NDSCS culinary students. Thanks for driving up all the way up here. Today I wanted to talk to you about the idea of a modern chef in our modern world. So a little bit about myself first. My name's Travis. It all started in the 90s with Bunny Cakes and Emerald. Bunny Cakes was probably the first cookbook I ever read. It was a child's book. And then Emerald Lagasse, for all those people that were not born in the 90s, this guy was food for a lot of us. And that was kind of a similarity, is that it was all the Food Network, and he was very much the face of it. But then you fast forward to the 20 years later, and I was looking to go to culinary school. And I happened upon the Netflix show called Chef's Table, in particular Dan Barber's Chef's Table. I watched that and was completely convinced that I wanted to cook in his fashion and his method of cooking. So I enrolled into the farm-oriented program at the International Culinary Center in New York, which later on had a tie into the Blue Hill Stone Barns Center in upstate New York. While I was there, I cooked my way in Narcissa in Cooper Square, and then went back to Philly to cook at Fork and High Street on Market. And then around that time, two things happened. Number one, I didn't want to work for $7.50 an hour, and Carson Wentz got drafted to the Philadelphia Eagles. At that point, I decided to open up my own food truck called Fargo Food, which sold Philadelphia cheesesteaks in the Fargo area. Figured that there was some Philadelphia flair that I could capitalize on, and moved out here. Since then, I sold that food truck and am now a co-founder of Harvestable, with that gentleman right over there, and we'll get back to that. So I want to go back and talk about the third plate, though, because this was immensely critical to how I think about food and my conversation today. So the third plate, I think, is without doubt probably the most important book one could read today, whether you're a chef, eater, or just interested in food. His thoughts right now are really leading the industry. And I chose 3 stanzas that I think are really important to and kind of sum up the book, and I'll read it out, is that rarely do we imagine the whole picture, which means that rarely are we forced to realize that a truly sustainable food system is not simple. Working together, farmers, chefs, and breeders can become part of a complex web of relationships that supports the health of the land, and yet those relationships don't last without a permanent food culture to sustain them. That is something only chefs and home cooks can provide. And I wanted to talk about today about the chef being that kind of bedrock for that culture. So the modern chef, I think, is an ambassador between the land and the people. And to that, I think that a modern chef has to encompass a couple traits. And smart, curious, intensely passionate, I think that folds into the compassion that we were talking about earlier. Leader, creativity, and forward thinking. And a lot of it is rested on understanding our current food system. So I want to take a little trip about a simplified food system currently. We're going to follow our Argentinian asparagus here. Argentina does plant and grow and harvest a lot of organic asparagus, and they're usually on monoculture farms, And those are then put into a truck to a dock, then it's shipped or planed out to another dock in the US. Takes a bit of time, goes to a warehouse to get to North Dakota, a few warehouses, then Cisco, chef picks it up, and then we eat it. And in the background is looming oil all the time. It's used there to harvest it, to grow it, and to transport it. This is how we should all strive for our food systems to be. And I think this is where the chefs have to start thinking in this nature, is that the simple transaction between the land and the chef is how we need to start thinking about food. And Dan Barber really sums this up when he talks about cuisines. He says that cuisines, all of them took their shape and form from the local landscape could offer. It wasn't an abundance that creates cuisines, it's actually practicality and knowing what the land can offer. Chefs need to start thinking in that mindset and understand, what do we have here in Fargo? What do we have in Detroit? What do we have anywhere? And how can I create that and make a unique cuisine for my customers? It's equally important that the customers understand that as well. So how am I doing my part for this? I'm not cooking as much anymore. I've kind of traversed into a different area of how I work in the community. And so one of them is Harvestable. It's a web-based platform that's connecting local farmers and local chefs so that we can get their food into our restaurants. And then additionally, I am the project manager for the North Dakota Culinary Institute project, which a lot of these values are being worked in, and this is how we're trying to think going forward so we can teach young chefs this way and hopefully in the long run change the way we actually see our food systems. And I really liked it in this one quote, which was misquoted by Dan Barber, but is a Wes Jackson quote. It says, if you're thinking of an idea you can solve in a lifetime, you're thinking too small. And so if we can start today thinking about this type of cooking and get chefs to think like that, consumers to think like that, perhaps generations after will be able to benefit from that. Thank you very much.
I'll take the clicker though. Thank you. All right, so now we are on to our question and answer session with our awesome speakers. Thank you guys all so much again. Before that, I would just like to publicly apologize to Phil Collins. Sorry. Okay. Also, I foolishly forgot my watch today, so Annie, can you give me a wave at like 8:55? All right, so now is our time where we can ask questions of these speakers. So whether you want to know a little bit more about a subject that they brought up or things that you've seen out in the food community, just raise your hand and I'll call on you. Mindy.
Hi, thank you so much for all your explanations, and I love that you all come from a different place and had different focuses and views on food. I'm wondering how you marry what you do with food and the care of people, the care of land with price and access.
Great question. I'll let any of you tackle that. The question is about instituting your values that you feel with food and then also making a price that consumers can digest and that makes your business profitable.
I'd be happy to start, or go ahead.
I think that's always an enormous challenge in restaurants. I think it's an enormous challenge, especially in the United States, in that we are very used to cheap food, and it's sort of gotten us to where we are nutritionally in the United States. But and restaurants are a very small margin business, so you're always weighing things, and you have to look at price, and you have to make decisions based on what you can afford, what makes sense for you. And there are things where we go with local flour. 25% of it is certified organic whole grain. The rest of our flour is North Dakota Mill, and that's a conventional wheat. I like North Dakota Mill, but if North Dakota Mill didn't certified organic, and I could afford it, I would probably use that. So I think, yeah, that's definitely, it's not a pat answer. It's something you have to look at all the time because harvests change, foods change, people's taste changes.
I think it's as a whole, you have to look, like Andrea was saying, at the whole picture because you can't just look at one aspect, especially with working at a corporation, you have to work around corporate framework, and make sure though that you're still providing the right nutrients that the patients need to get better. But there's also that challenge, so you gotta kind of weigh out what direction you need to go, but still make money while you're doing it as well, because that's the corporate kind of mentality sometimes. But we try to make conscious decisions on like finding something that's still a good product, but kind of in the middle too, that it doesn't necessarily have to be the top end, but it can still be good, and then we can take it to the next level with cooking.
I think that a lot of it comes in trying to figure out what the consumer is willing to pay for it. I think that there is a lot of, I think there's a lot of onus on the consumer to say, I understand the quality and therefore I will pay for the quality. Seems like we'll pay $1,000 for an iPhone that doesn't change too much, but we're gonna try to race to the bottom to eat food that isn't quality sometimes. Not all the times, but sometimes. So I think that does come in the mindset of saying, I know this institution, the chef behind there is great, and I will pay for the quality that I feel like I deserve to eat. For whatever reason, I think a lot of people, and there's variables to it, it's a very complicated answer, but I think that a lot of chefs are trying to weigh, how can I make margins that are already very slim accessible to my consumer so I don't scare them away. So I think that the values though that underlay that is saying, where do I stand as a chef? What do I want to promote with my restaurant? What are my consumers coming to me for? And can and will they pay for quality? A lot of it goes into that.
Thank you. So I have a question related to food being a change maker. So we hear a lot that gets thrown out about food has the power to change the world, and that gets broken down into so many different ways. But chefs are often seen in a highlighted role in that for being change agents and being those that can really implement change at community, national, and global level. So how do you see yourselves as change agents and trying to shape conversations or different ways of eating or different ways that people think about food?
Well, I think that it all really comes down to a plate of food. I mean, one of the sayings is breaking bread is to be able to conversate and relate with people. I think that is pertinent because it is food related. Food starts conversations. Food understands culture, people. You cannot speak to one another, but you'll understand each other through food. So I think that that really broadens the conversation, and then goes back to kind of what I've been promoting is the values in which you want to cook with, and using your restaurant now more than ever to be your platform to stand for something that you want to evoke into your community.
I think I agree with you that by offering like healthier options or different types of cuisine, we can open people's eyes and educate them about different foods, and it kind of bridges that gap with different cultures of food, and we can learn about other cultures through their food, and get to know each other by trying a different type of food. And I just think that if we can add more nutrients and healthy things to our cooking, that maybe people might start eating better. I mean, like, make it delicious, obviously, and then that would inspire them somehow to go home and try something and then cook a little healthier, because a lot of the patients at Prairie haven't been exposed to that. And so by educating them on what they can eat and giving them different options, maybe they'll be inspired to go home and make something else.
I think I'm becoming a contrarian in my old age, but so I don't see myself as a change agent.
I think some would beg to differ.
No, but any more than anyone, we all have the opportunity to be change agents in so many ways in our lives. I think you have a lot of decisions, and what I find is it's sometimes hard to get beyond sort of the general white noise of every day to sort of see, like, sometimes I feel like I'm just going along, and I go along, and then I realize, oh, that was, this is an opportunity to look at this, or this is an opportunity to honor this, or, or people educate me on many things. And so I think that's how I see it, is more of, there's a relationship, and I just have to pay attention sometimes to what's being offered to me.
With a busy kitchen, I can imagine that can be challenging at times.
Yes.
Yeah. All right, Mara.
This is a question for each of you, but at this point in your work world, what is the most interesting or surprising thing that you find?
The question is related to what's the most interesting or surprising thing that you find in your current work life?
Well, I'd just like to go back to the last question real quick and saying that, Andrea, you are a change agent. I did not expect to find one of the best Jewish restaurants in Fargo, North Dakota. As a Jew myself, I thought the population increased at 0 to 1 every time I came out here. So that is that's a change agent. Mara, to your question, a lot of the times I think that more I got engaged with food is the more I'm surprised at how many people don't understand it. Everyone enjoys eating food and doing it on social media and whatnot, but when it gets down to really understanding where is that coming from and understanding how that got here or not, there are some people that don't even know chickens are chickens before they eat chicken. I was in Pittsburgh talking to a woman who runs an urban garden in a poverty zone. And she was saying how the community thought that the only attachment they had to food was what they were given. So whether it be a dollar store or a Taco Bell or something, that was their food. That was their entire understanding of food. So when they started community gardening, I understand that they can grow stuff and they can take back their food systems. That's incredibly inspiring to me. But I think that that's one of the oddities is that on Netflix now you can find more than probably any other topic is food documentaries on how we're all either dying or living more because we're eating steak and pasta. It's like next day you don't eat avocados and next day they're the best thing for you. It's like we're being wish-washed all around. And yet that extreme interest in that is contrasted with a really deep ignorance of where the food comes from and how it ends up on our shelves. So I think as I got closer to that in my work life, that continues to be the response that I get a lot of the time. So I'd say that was probably the more shocking things that I found.
Kind of similar to Travis's answer. I guess the thing that I'm kind of surprised about is how people don't put the connection of food and fuel together and how you need that fuel for your body, but some people, I guess I'm just obsessed with food, and so people don't put it as front and center, and you kind of need that to live. But I eat for pleasure, so it's kind of different, but.
Well, surprising. Actually, Travis, you mentioned, I never thought I'd be cooking Jewish food, but here I am. And it's actually been, recently, that is the most, I think whatever you cook, there's like this opportunity to see the world through that, like learn so much about the world or a culture or history through that. And I was asked to talk about bagels at a class, and I unfortunately didn't do this research before, but right now I'm in this heavy Jewish food research, like reading phase, and it's incredibly interesting and eye-opening. And one of the things that I've learned that is really makes me happy is that the idea of a Jewish deli is a very second-generation immigrant American thing. There aren't Jewish delis elsewhere, and so that's sort of blown my mind recently.
Thank you. All right, Marisa.
Okay, so I saw a video recently that was talking about how specifically in American culture, cooking is just not really emphasized. It's very, we're fast food and things like that. Whereas in countries like France, and Andrea, maybe you can talk to this, it's implemented at a really young age, and people always talk about French are so healthy, and it's not because
people of America, make it more of a norm?
I'll just repeat the question for the video. So the question relates to the importance of cooking and that has been lost in American culture, and it's done so well in countries like France, and they have better health outcomes, and how can we make that part of American culture again?
I'm gonna jump in here because that's one of my favorite topics in the world. I think teaching people to cook cooking is a life skill, and it's also a way to recognize connection, social connection, history, and I do believe it's something important that we need to embrace. And so I think it's a real opportunity out there. And one thing I was involved with a couple years ago, it was actually to help introduce fruits and vegetables with kindergartners. And we taught them 4 simple recipes, because if you teach someone to make something, especially young kids, they'll adopt it way more easily. They'll be interested in it. They'll want to try it because they made it. And so we sort of had this junior chef thing, but I do think about that all the time with Edible Schoolyard, with the fact that cooking should be taught, gardening should be taught, because it will help all of those outcomes. Anyone else want to?
That's a great question. It's got a lot of layers, so probably longer than the 5-minute response. Historically speaking, the reason why the French, Italians, Germans have great cuisines is because for thousands of years, French farmers couldn't enter Germany without being killed. And so there was borders where you had a peasant culture that had to develop their cuisines throughout hundreds of years. Coq au vin is one of the quintessential French dishes. It started as a peasant dish. Through abundance, the royalty and riches made people eat it, and we express that through their cuisines today. America doesn't have much of cuisine. We have dishes that are nationally recognized, but there's no peasant cuisine. And if you go on Medium, on Harvestable's Medium, I wrote an article about this. But from a very young age, like Andrea said, you go to McDonald's, you go get pizza, you go get Mountain Dews and potato chips. And like Andrea said, if you teach someone how to cook, it's very, very, it's an important skill. And in a shorthand type of thing is that we can get that back if we all really want to figure out what grows where we are and let the chefs dictate what we want to eat. Living off of the land, getting very engaged with farmers, and being creative. That's one of the cuisine building things, is that chefs have to be on the consistent teeter-totter of business and creative all the time. But that creative sense is what's going to inspire cuisine. So perhaps one day you'll go and, man, that North Dakota cuisine was awesome, or that Vermont cuisine was great. I mean, that's currently where we're standing. But unfortunately speaking, as social science kind of looks at it, is that cooking is going down. It's going to be more or less a skill that people don't need to use anymore, much like knitting or crocheting. I'm wondering what you're making over there, by the way. So at any rate, it's very much like the book says, is that if you give a man a fish, he eats for a day, and if you teach him how to fish, he eats for a lifetime. It's very much the same aspect now. So.
I have one thing to add too. I think we can use cooking to teach our own children how to cook for the skill, and then use it as an avenue to open up communication as well, or pass down that recipe, the special family recipe from generation to generation, which I think so it kind of stays in the family and they can pass it down to their kids, which I think is important too.
Awesome. I'll just add one thing for that. If anyone has read or seen anything from Michael Pollan, he made a great quote that said, Food Network and all those other shows have made cooking a spectator sport. People just watch cooking. We don't actively cook. So if you're out in the audience right now and you're watching a lot of food shows, go into the kitchen and start cooking, and invite a little person to come in with you. I try cooking with my niece as much as I can. It's chaotic, but it's a good experience. So did you have something else to add?
No, I just had to keep the mic.
Okay. Question, Roger.
I'm watching TV, seen a program from someplace out east, their restaurant served food by the ounce. They'd come up with the program, so many times we go to a restaurant, we get way too much food. I'd rather pay less and eat it. What can
Amen.
we do with something like that?
Who wants the next restaurant concept in Fargo?
I actually had a restaurant concept called a pile of meat, which was just you order and a pile of meat shows up. Maybe it'll happen, maybe it won't. You could probably work here. So there's two reasons to that. Number one, we're in a gluttonous age. I mean, right now, there's more abundance of food that we actually dump, 30% of it out every time, 40. So that gives you a kind of a snapshot of how much we actually have and are growing. A lot of that, though, and there's a short story, is down to nutrition. So there's a story out of the Stone Barn Center in New York where they took a brick scale of 2 carats. Now, bricks is the measurement of sugar in a vegetable, and sugars meaning all the nutrients. So they took a stock carrot from Mexico, which you can find at a Sam's Club, and they took a carrot that was grown at the Stone Barn Center and took bricks. The Stone Barn Center bricks was, I think, 9.3, which is very high. The carrot from Sam's Club was 0.0. So in essence, you're getting a carrot but no nutrition, which is like eating for substance. You're gonna be full, but your body's not grasping any nutrients from that. And those nutrients is what tells your body, okay, I'm sufficiently fueled now, we can go on. But right now, there's a lot of food that's saying, there's nothing in there. So what's your body gonna take? So you eat a lot just to fill yourself up.
I think that's an interesting concept. I think there is this idea of plenty that's been culturally appropriate for a really long time, and the plenty is too much. It's way too much. And so we have to scale that down. But it's interesting sometimes when you do scale it down, like even at our restaurant, we don't have fries on the side because we don't have a fryer. We don't have a commercial kitchen right now. And sometimes when we get new people in, they'll say, well, what can I get on the side? We'll say, oh, you can order something on the side if you need something on the side of your sandwich. And I can tell sometimes there's such an idea of bundling that they feel like they're not getting a value because they're not getting 3 things, even though the sandwich is probably for most people enough. You can certainly get a cup of soup or something on the side, but it's an interesting thing to, in a sense, we do make them pay by the ounce in the sense that nothing comes with it. So you get exactly what you order. And for the most part, it works.
So we are down to our final question, and I apologize for anyone whose hand has been raised and we haven't had a chance to take your question, but there will be time after our conversation where you can grab our speakers and ask your question. But we always end each first Friday with asking how we can help you. There's an audience of 80 plus people here today, whether it be your business or your values or just what you want to see in our Fargo-Moorhead food community. What can we do to support you?
Well, for my own sake and for Harvestable, just, if you're going out to eat, no matter where you're going really, but for this case in the Fargo-Moorhead area, is ask where they're sourcing from. We're trying to make it with Harvestable as accessible to order local food as it is from the Cisco truck. Mm-hmm. So, and I talk about this in another thing is, you gotta hold. A lot of people, especially in New York where I came from, they're using the farm to table as a advertising method, which is, as an advocate for that movement, is something that you need to hold them to a standard to, and as eaters should expect from your chefs. At the same time, it's onus on the consumer to understand what they're paying for and that quality. So the onus on you is to say, man, I could go get a bucket of chicken for $5, or I can go to, say, a BernBaum's and get a fantastic sandwich that will fill me up, made with great ingredients. So it's a bit of a back and forth type of relationship, but I think a lot of it is just educating yourself and getting to know more about the food you eat and the food systems and people that are making your food.
So you can't really come visit me at my restaurant. But I would say like think of the FM community as kind of an ecosystem, food ecosystem. Like we're buying locally, going to local restaurants, so we're feeding the community back with when you're going to visit either her at BernBaum's or whatever. And then also I would say if we could be more aware of people that are maybe struggling with mental health issues, and just be aware that every day someone's struggling, and then kind of to work towards erasing that stigma that surrounds mental health, which I think would be really good.
That's such a great point, especially in this season. I've had a couple experiences recently where being able to give someone a cup of coffee and let them sit down, and I just thought of something that my therapist used to say, which is to be gentle with yourself, but to be gentle with others. And I feel very well supported, especially by this crowd. Thank you for eating bagels. And yeah, support local, absolutely. Why not? There's no reason not to.
All right, well, thank you all so much. Can you all please join me in thanking our fabulous speakers?